So my job was easy to kind of provide a background for a really important conversation on coherence between standards and government guidance, and really have a great group of experts here. And I guess I'd like everyone we'd like to start off. I'd like each of you to introduce yourself. And as part of that introduction, maybe talk a little bit about how you got sorry. Is that better for folks? If you could introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your role in the quantum space and in the standards or government guidance space. Okay. So Blair, would you like to get us started?
I did know I was on this panel. I was just zoning out on your fantastic story. So nothing like starting off with a bang. My name is Blair Canavan. I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. Quickly, my background is I've been in the cyberspace for well over 30 years. We're all in this together. What I'm doing now is a very exciting role at a company called Talis, or Thales. If you don't know how to pronounce it, it'll work. We'll still answer. Talis is a significant player in the post-quantum space, as you know, and I'll try not to get into all that, but I'm here representing also the Canadian Forum for Internet Digital Resiliency, and Talis is a member of that from a post-quantum point of view. So my role at Talis is post-quantum from a, quote, evangelism as well as a partnership point of view, working with the likes of evolutionQ and others. And I hope I can contribute a little bit in terms of what the Canadian government is up to and what our colleagues are all doing to bring this all together.
Great.
Okay, if we just go down the line, I'm Dustin Moody. I'm a mathematician at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Donna used to be at NIST, and I was happy to work with her, and so it's great to see her again. I'm still not sure how I ended up being involved with post-quantum cryptography, because my background is entirely in researching elliptic curves and in math, but I got a job at NIST, and they said, why don't you be on this post-quantum crypto project? And I said, okay, that sounds really neat. What is it? And somehow that led to all of this. But yeah, NIST, is you're probably all familiar with, does a variety of scientific endeavors. The part I'm in does standards for cryptography. Our official stakeholder is the United States government, where we approve crypto systems for non-national security systems, but we know that the standards we set get adopted globally by industry and other organizations. Donna put a lot of a great background. With post-quantum, of course, we've been the past 6 or 7 years doing this competition-like process to select new algorithms, and we have selected the algorithms that we are going to standardize, and right now we put out the draft FIPS standards, and they're out for public comment. So I'd also just encourage everyone to provide any public comment on those as well.
Dustin is not giving the full picture here because he actually led all of the post-quantum work for NIST.
And when you see announcements from NIST, they're from him, actually. So his name's on the bottom of those emails.
Now you know who to blame.
Yes. Hi, I'm Paul Hoffman. I work for ICANN, the organization that helps manage the top-level domain names. I'm here today because I'm also co-chair of the PQC Working Group in the IETF. The IETF, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with, as a standards body. The IETF is standardizing ways to use post-quantum algorithms in existing standards and in new standards and such like that. My working group explicitly is not doing any standardization, but instead we're helping coordinate across the IETF because there's a bunch of different research groups and implementation groups that are doing it. And the ICANN's interest is, as you're probably aware, the DNS has a protocol called DNSSEC for securing it, which uses signatures, and therefore we are as affected not on the key management part, which is what's much more immediate to people, but long term we have to keep the signatures up to date and such like that. So that's where I come in from ICANN. But really I'm here to say the IETF, we've got your back on standards if you're using IETF standards, for layer 3 and up, such like that. So.
Yeah, Natasha.
Morning, everybody. Natasha Eastman from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within DHS. And my title that we have up here is my day job, but I am the chief of CISA's Post-Quantum Cryptography Initiative, which was founded about 2 years ago to address the threat from quantum computers towards cybersecurity and specifically towards cryptography. And CISA as an organization focuses on risk to critical infrastructure, and that is all 16 sectors that we consider here in the United States. We think about our telco and communication sector being one of them. We also think about energy and nuclear sector and transportation and healthcare and all of the other implementations of cryptography across the wide range of infrastructure in the United States. And I took this job originally when I was our liaison to NSA, because CISA's work in this area is so wrapped up in the work that we do with our partners like NIST and like with that, NSA and others. But I've been excited to keep it even as I've transitioned into running operations for an organization that deals with our threat hunting work. So all of our hunt and incident response activities, because encryption is such a key part of cybersecurity and how we see adversaries getting after critical information. So the two really do intersect, and excited to continue the work on it.
And you're putting out some guidance as well, right? Do you want to tell us a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So CISA's guidance, really, we leave the standards work to our colleagues at NIST from a government standpoint, but our guidance is really on what do critical infrastructure owners need to know. How are they supposed to be taking action on this? A lot of folks in big IT companies or telco or finance, may have quantum experts or people that are working on this particular topic. A lot of the owners and operators within critical infrastructure don't. In critical infrastructure, small companies may have an IT guy. They may have no IT people, right? They may have a COO who's working on this. So, our guidance really focuses on, okay, I hear about this post-quantum thing, or I hear about this quantum computing thing. Okay, what do I need to do now? And so that guidance, I think you gave a great introduction, Donna, in terms of the steps that organizations need to take. But what we're messaging to critical infrastructure is starting with the data. What data do they have? Doing that understanding of what their systems are that protects that data. Because whether it's government and you've got 3-year budget cycles where you need to start preparing now for changes that they want to make in 2030, or they're in an owner operator of an ICS environment where upgrading an OT system is a multi-year effort, or thinking about someone in the space sector where you put up a satellite and updating that is incredibly difficult. We need people to start thinking about that if we're going to get them to that 2030-ish deadline for being PQC safe.
So, Paul, changing out an algorithm, why is this such a big deal? What challenges do you think organizations might face when implementing some of the new PQC standards?
Donna's throwing me a softball here.
It's just like wave the magic wand and...
So, from the IETF perspective, when we are saying, here are new algorithms, we never say, this is when you're supposed to be using them. We expect people to have their own risk management. But having said that, we put out a lot of algorithms and then we watch what happens. And what we've seen in the past, especially as NIST has upgraded their guidance, as the NSA upgraded their guidance in the United States, going from RSA to elliptic curve and such like that. What we see is that there are basically 3 categories. I don't need to think about it because my software just updates. I sort of need to think about it because I have to remember to do an update of the software, and then oh my God, this is going to take a lot of work. And that's either because I've written bespoke software or I've got hardware and I can't just swap out the hardware. So trying to deal with those 3 groups at once is really hard, because the first group is the easiest one to deal with. They say, I'm supposed to know about this, that's all I know. It's the third group, the ones where it's going to be hard. It's hard for different reasons. So in telco, some of you are going to have a really hard time because the hardware, like how do you pull out a thing that has hardware and put in the new one? How do you keep the system going as you're doing that? But also even for software, how do you know that both ends are upgraded at the same time? So I like to focus on the first group. Y'all can, you all especially are going to, the third group ones are going to be the hardest ones.
And Blair, what kinds of challenges are you talking to folks about? Are there any particular to PQC as well?
Yeah, certainly to Paul's point, I look at this as it takes a village. This is the biggest undertaking paradigm shift we've seen in cryptography, and I started in this realm in 1996. The lines are blurred between software, hardware, firmware, as you mentioned, people, process, and technology. So this collaborative effort that we've never seen the likes of, and all the competitors have pushed their differences and their solutions really to the right and the left and looked at the problem holistically. And there's a symbiotic relationship that we're all trying to get from, current state to desired state. And what I'm seeing firsthand is just know, to your point, don't panic about it, but don't be presumptuous that everybody's got it figured out. We're still paving the road in front of us, literally as we implement. And when I say implement, it's POCs that we're starting right now, whether it's government or commercial entities and so on. Your point about hardware, we just happen to build hardware. We also happen to build software. And funny how our teams weren't necessarily aligned. So we're eating our own, we're practicing our own, practicing what we preach across our 27 business units, which range from putting satellites in space, defense entities, but from the Canadian government, which I really want to make sure I don't forget about that, what we're really supposed to do is set the tone and take a pragmatic approach and say, you might have some aging infrastructure to address. Try not to bite it too much off, but understand that there's going to be this hardware, software, people, process, technology, and the more you talk about it up front, the sooner you're talking about it up front, the better. So from a Canadian perspective, we're leaning into it, but I wouldn't say that we are by any means, from a Canadian perspective, leading the charge. We are watching what the rest of the world is doing, and we're also challenging the rest of the world, because not everything that you hear from the hype curve is necessarily applicable, but we are very excited that I've seen personally, like I said, the collaboration from industry and government is superb. And there's this common challenge is affecting us all, and it's affecting the entire world. So,
Natasha, are there lessons learned from the past that would be applicable for PQC?
Yeah, and I think this gets towards some of the challenges in implementation as well. And I think we're seeing this as we ran our first U.S. government crypto inventory, in the last year. I'll take it back to a kind of a cybersecurity tenet, and trying to look at, how do we look at a software bill of materials or a hardware bill of materials? Crypto algorithms can be buried in modules, right? They can be buried in software implementation, hardware implementation. And as the designers and builders, you obviously have an insight into that. For those that may be using open source software or have hired a contractor to build their software or, whatever it is, we saw this with Log4j, right? Where we had Log4j that was embedded in technology across the board, and it took months. We're still finding things that all of a sudden we go, oh, it's vulnerable to Log4j. We got to patch that, right? It's the same with crypto. And we are seeing that across the board in critical infrastructure is finding it within infrastructure is a challenge. And so, getting to that level of knowledge about what are the building blocks of the technology that we own and operate is going to have a really impactful message and just a big impact generally on our ability to move forward in this space.
Dustin, can you talk to us about priority areas to consider when implementing PQC?
Sure. Post-quantum definitely has lots of challenges. And for example, the algorithms we selected, they are based on different areas of mathematics. They're more complicated. They have larger key sizes. So you need to take a look at some of these algorithms and make sure that they're going to work or fit in your applications and protocols and see if some of them might need to be changed. They have larger key sizes. Good news in terms of efficiency is that they are very, very efficient, so hopefully that won't be a challenge. But other priorities, inventorying your systems, finding where cryptography is going to be used, that's definitely a very hard task. You need to look at what type of cryptography, what the information that it's protecting is used. The United States government has a goal of 2035 by migrate to as much as possible all their systems to PQC. Crypto transitions take a really, really long time, so I doubt that everything would be migrated, but it's good to have a very ambitious goal. Start planning and start preparing, so making a plan would also be another high priority.
Natasha, do you have any thoughts on priority areas?
Yeah, so as we looked at how we were telling organizations to do this inventory, the first was looking at, in government we have what's called high value assets, where we've already done this inventory of where are our critical systems. But as we looked at what those high value assets were, we recognized that sometimes the IT infrastructure that protected the systems and across the board was not included. And so that inventory also included things like access control, identity management systems that would provide access broadly to critical systems across the network. But for organizations that don't have high value asset programs or anything like that, thinking again, starting with the data in long time frame data that needs to be protected.
How about PKI? Do you see agencies starting there as well?
That's exactly why we put that last category there, is that PKI systems were generally not included in HVAs, and we felt that they were essential for organizations to prioritize, especially given the broad use of PKI for both access control and in across the federal government.
So, Dustin, I at the end of my talk made the remark that as we look at quantum, we need to think about how quantum can help us with some of the challenges of our cybersecurity infrastructure. And one area of that could be quantum key distribution for quantum resilience. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so quantum key distribution, very, very interesting. It has the property that you can guarantee by the laws of physics, perfect information security. So that, in cryptography, that would be what would be ideal. Unfortunately, there's also some limitations yet which have yet to be overcome. So there are some applications where this could be very useful, where you need very high security needs, and you have the resources to devote to build the, all the equipment that you need to go along with this. But it's unlikely that this is going to be what is used for most of us around the world and for most of our applications. So QKD, very important for some applications. It'll continue to be researched. But there are some limitations, like it can't do authentication. It's got geographic limitations that make it so for now, the US government isn't allowing it for national security systems until some of these limitations can be overcome. So it can be a part of the equation, but it's not for NIST kind of our central focus, because post-quantum cryptography is such a priority.
And my friend Paul, I know you have thoughts and opinions on this. We'd like to hear them.
So I'm the skeptic in the room, I'm one of the skeptics in the room about QKD. I feel that, and again, this is not wearing an IETF hat, because the IETF does not do any standardization work around QKD, and hasn't even looked at it as a research topic yet, or has decided not to look at it. I think it's a distraction. I think that it is absorbing a lot of money that could better be spent on preparing for the things that we know about. I would love to see even a tenth of the money that is spent on building QKD systems being spent to pay cryptographers to try to break the stuff that Dustin is standardizing, so that we know that it's not just academics who are looking at this, but people who are motivated by money. So to me, yeah, QKD exists. It's a market and such like that. I think it will have such limited use. I would love to see the energy behind it actually being put into the post-quantum algorithms. Is that light enough?
So I'm interested in hearing from each one of you, and we'll start with Blair and kind of go down the row. What are the dependencies between government policy regarding the adoption of PQC and the development of standards?
Wow, that's a good one. I still believe it's very much a collaborative approach, and certainly I'll even use the context of Five Eyes. We're looking back and forth and across the entities to see where there's a consistent approach, a pragmatic approach to look at it like aging infrastructure. This is what we have in place with, say, for example, PKI. The desired state is get to a post-quantum safe PKI. So I wouldn't say it's a battle, but there's a very vigorous debate in terms of how to, for example, dare I say it, some of those algorithms from a signature point of view, we haven't tested this out in real time. We don't know what we don't know, but we do know that if there's, and I use the word patience between industry and government, and also this consistent dialogue across from the FIPS, the NSA, the NIST groups to make sure that we're not, I guess, we've got to merge together in a fairly aggressive. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of, I say, time. I know some people would like to kick the can down the hall for another 10 years on the symmetric side, but the public key infrastructure, the PKI reliant technologies, the RSA dependency that we have for code signing, for IoT, for we rely on PKI, the underlying infrastructure. I'm hoping that what I'm seeing is that these efforts between industry, as I said, it takes a village, the customer, which is these government organizations, and industry, that we're all collaborating in. I've seen phenomenal conversations, but I've also seen a little bit of leaning back, which I don't think is a very good thing. I know that in the last 12 months, giving some context, that we've gone from, in some respects, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, PQC, yeah, we're aware of it.
QKD, well, that's really cool. That's really interesting. And now we need to talk. And I've seen that absolute shift in conversation. And that goes back to your point about discovering cryptographic assets. It goes back to
Understanding what your situation analysis is. It's just a very simple comment, but it takes an incredible amount of collaboration. So if I didn't say collaboration 3 times there, I'd like to just say the 4th.
Yeah, and I'd agree with collaboration for sure. That's one thing I saw during our NIST process is there's standards organizations from industry and other governments around the world that are all needing to tackle this challenge, and very much they collaborated and participated in the process and didn't try to kind of do their own thing and fracture the effort. So I think it's great to see that will help global adoption to a large degree because we'll have interoperability with a smaller number of solutions. So that's a very positive thing. The U.S. government's been very active in helping push standardization. We've seen national security memos, legislation from Congress, and NIST has been kind of leading the charge at this front. But we very much want to work with other standards organizations, other countries as well, so that we get post-quantum cryptography all around the world for everybody to use. And the government likes to buy off-the-shelf equipment, so we need industry to use these things as well. So it's very much collaborative, and everyone needs to work together on it, yeah.
So the IETF doesn't do government such, so I can't speak for government collaboration, but I can speak as an observer of someone who doesn't do it. I would disagree with what Dustin just said. I've seen plenty of SDOs going their own way while NIST comes out with these standards. For us in the IETF, that becomes difficult. Do we pick only one algorithm to bless, or do we let others go in? We always have to deal with the question, not as big here in the United States, of government-sponsored crypto, and there's going to be government-sponsored post-quantum cryptography. I would love what Dustin was saying to be true, but I don't believe that it is. I see, in fact, competition. We get nudges from some of the European standards organizations saying, please don't lock down just on NIST. And we even have the question of NIST has multiple, I mean, we're talking now about one NIST KEM, one NIST signature, but they've already said what they are going to standard, or some of what they're going to standardize later. So do we only does the IETF only focus on the first thing out of NIST, or do we focus on all of them? It's very tough because governments change over time.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge to think of it from a U.S. government perspective, but then to take that hat and think of how we've been working with our international partners. Because, in a U.S. government perspective, we've been, as mentioned, very forward-leaning and trying to put dates on the calendar, put guidance out there, because we want people to move. We want people to start saying, okay, we need to talk about this. We need to take action. We need to get going. But doing that, as mentioned, in the absence of a hard and fast standard, we're going to move. What do we do? And so we're kind of balancing that between, okay, think about preparation, think about testing, and then getting towards the implementation side once we have those standards and the agreement there. As we talk to our international partners, they're thinking about, okay, how do I even talk to my critical infrastructure about this? Where are the experts? And what does that look like? Especially you get out of places like the Five Eyes, that may not do their own standardization, but they're looking to adopt others.
So a couple of people have used the term Five Eyes, and I know when I used to sit in meetings with government or with people, and they would use acronyms that I wasn't quite as familiar, I'd be kind of like Googling quickly. Can someone give us? I know, but can we tell the audience a little about what?
Everybody's looking at me, so I'll. Yeah. No. So the Five Eyes being the UK, Canada, the United States, New Zealand, and Australia, and used in many contexts, but kind of historical ties from a SIGINT intelligence system perspective. And that pervades in any number of ways, including standards adoption and collaboration on national security that goes way beyond the intelligence community. But that's the origin of it.
Thank you.
Keep it short.
I just so people in the audience had that background. Okay. I'd really like to sneak in another question that's not on, that was one we hadn't talked about. Because you said something that it's just tickling in my mind.
By the way, historically, Donna and I have worked together over time, and we often have this little dance going on.
So we hear about resilience and crypto agility all the time and the importance of that. And I think I talked about it, and I had a long conversation where Ron Rivest really scolded me on lack of crypto agility. And yet you said something that I think crypto agility is hard when we're looking at standards, I think. I think that was some of what you were saying. Does PQC pose any significant challenges to crypto agility? And how do we still get to crypto agility?
So that's an excellent question. That was easier question than what I expected.
But it just begged to be asked.
Absolutely, because so in the past, crypto agility has not been about this algorithm that you're using now is broken, you need to move to a new one. It was the algorithm that you're using now, we expect to age badly, and therefore please jump ahead with this new one, especially going from RSA to elliptic curve. What we are hearing now is because of the amount of FUD in about post-quantum cryptography and when these cryptographically relevant quantum computers will be here. And when I say FUD, I'm not saying that they're wrong or right. There is such a variety that you can pick which date, who you want to believe. What we have now is agility between old classic stuff, and Don and I are in the same age range. We don't like being called old and classic as much. and the new thing that we believe you're going to need. So it's a different kind of crypto agility. It's not just, oh, I should look forwards because the stuff, has been broken. It's like, this looks a lot better. And it's made worse or better, depending on how you look at it, from NIST, because NIST has said, here's the first round of algorithms, but we're going to have additional ones. And that's because some of this is very new. NIST doesn't want to put all their eggs in one basket, but they're almost begging you to be able to do agility later, but all we hear about is their first round. So that's a very hard decision. And for especially folks, maybe not in the US telco biz, but in the international telco biz, this is made harder because the first round of key exchange mechanisms that they're doing has some patents on it, which NIST has gotten very good agreement on, but people from other countries don't necessarily want to have to accept something with a patent owned by an American or owned by a European and such like that. So maybe they're going to need agility for legal reasons. It gets much messier.
Can I respond a little to that, Donna?
You bet.
Oh, sure, yeah. So there's a tricky balance with standardization where we want, and interoperability where we want as few algorithms as possible. But then for reasons like Paul mentioned, we need to have more than one algorithm in this particular case. We have key establishment as well as digital signatures, different performance profiles, and we want to have different security assumptions.
Different key sizes.
Different key sizes.
And people's ways.
So we do have kind of some waves of standardization occurring. We expect that the main algorithms we selected with Kyber and dilithium to be the two main algorithms that everybody will use for most applications. But we are standardizing other things, and we understand that can be confusing, but those are the ones that we expect to kind of be the main applications, even though that we have some fourth round algorithms. We're going to establish or standardize one or two more chems, and we have an additional call for signatures to kind of come up with some backup algorithms not based on structured lattices. With regards to the patents, I'm not a lawyer, so I have to give that disclaimer. There were IP issues during the process. There were some potential patents that could apply to Kyber. It's not been settled by a court or taken to court, so nobody knows with any certainty. NIST did get licenses so that you don't have to worry about those patents if you follow what's in our NIST standard. And if you have further questions on that, you can talk to our NIST lawyers, and the people who have done that have come away satisfied. But yeah, it still is a concern. Yeah.
But since I took us down this little track that I think is really important, it gets to one of the highlights of some of the work that you all have already done, and that's the importance of planning with your infrastructure and starting now instead of waiting and putting some of this off as you're looking and making some of these decisions, because some of this is about your risk, and understanding your risk takes some time and some planning. So I apologize for taking us down this little path, and I'll get us back on track. But it really goes to the importance of that risk management process and that planning. Okay, back on track. Thank you all. Does the panel have any recommendations for handling challenges of legacy infrastructure? And Blair will.
Great. Excellent question. So speaking from, again, infrastructure in place, or to some people, stuff they didn't even know existed because it sits in the bowels of some organizations like a UPS. Software like PKI, which is an underpinning for so much, and the underpinning for that is roots of trust, which is hardware security modules, have been around for 25 plus years. And I remember the origins of that being that we're going to build these things, and likely their shelf life is, like a typical Cisco router. We'll swap them out in 5 years or 6 years. No. These things stand the test of time, 10 plus, 15 plus years. Some of them are 20 years. The good news is that most of the existing infrastructure will not have to be ripped out and replaced. And that's a really fantastic testimony to a design that started in the early to mid 90s, because we have the ability to swap out and switch out algorithms from a firmware point of view, but also from an implementation point of view. So the good news is that most of the hardware will be able to be upgraded, and the software obviously running on said hardware in field, with the caveat that we don't know the performance of the post-quantum algorithms as it relates to the implementation. Those use cases are being tested out in real time, meaning we all know what RSA and ECC is capable of from a performance point of view. And by the way, another little asterisk is most hardware companies have optimized ECC and RSA performance to get an acceptable level of performance for doing something as simple as checking your email. You can't wait 5 seconds without getting impatient. We are impatient. So these things are coming along, but the good news is that this is not, as I said, a rip and replace, build it from scratch, but do not presume this is going to happen overnight. There's got to be a lot of pre-planning, and this is what this whole discovery and understanding your information assets, where you're at, what desired state, and how you're going to merge into traffic. Because we rely on it. You can't put it offline for a couple of days, do a software upgrade, and flip the go switch. It doesn't work that way.
Natasha.
Yeah, so I'll take it a slightly different direction, and that's thinking about, again, this in a kind of wider cybersecurity context. I think the areas that we're really focused on, and that we're dealing with legacy systems, is as organizations consider unsupported technologies across their organization. Right? There's whether it's hardware or software, just pieces of technology that the owners and operators of that software no longer support. And so critical infrastructure has to wrestle with that. And that's not just a PQC problem. Let me be clear on that, right? That is a cybersecurity problem. When we see organizations, government or critical infrastructure running, Windows 2000 on their network, which happens a lot more commonly than you think it does, right? It's not just the quantum space that we're in trouble for, but it definitely is. And so, where we need organizations to think about how to push those updates across their network, or thinking about, all right, if that is an asset that we cannot change out, how do we secure it in a different way? Because, from a risk perspective, there's always a multitude of options that organizations can take, and we need them to start planning for that. As you mentioned, this isn't an overnight transition.
Okay, so we have a few minutes to wrap up, and with that, I'd like to ask each of you, what are key activities you'd like to see in the telco space to support a timely PQC journey? We'll start at the far end and work our way.
So we were actually just having an interesting conversation on this, and I'll repeat it for the group because I think it's worth talking about. A lot of telcos are international companies. They have operations or partners across the globe. And so, from a CISA and I think a U.S. government perspective, and I'll leave it to my colleagues to talk about, I think things internal to each of those entities. But, this is a global conversation. I think that the telco community and the communications community can drive that conversation across the globe, and talking to their partners, talking to the vendor community and their customers, really help accelerate this as we think about, the next 10, 15 years of transition and adoption.
So I want to extend what Natasha just said. Because many of you are international companies, you are going to face some pressure to follow different standards. And again, going back to the IETF perspective, we would like to have fewer algorithms that we have to push through. One of the things that you can actively do if you are an international organization is try to get your crypto people to push towards any of the other standards bodies other than NIST to say, please follow the NIST algorithms. Yes, they're all nice. Yes, everyone has reasons for them. But the more algorithms we have, the much harder your life is going to be. Don't forget, like even with PKI, you can fix your certificate generator, but you need all your relying parties to come along. So if there's something you can do today about this, even if you're not doing, I mean, you should be doing your inventories and such, it is to try to reduce the amount of international friction that we have for picking algorithms.
Yeah, those are great answers. What else to add to that? I think just looking for where you can get good guidance. We've heard a lot of it today. A project that I haven't mentioned as well as NIST has what's called the NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence that's running a migration to PQC project. We're partnering with industry to put out a lot of good guidance there. The Canadian government, the GSMA Association put out that report that has great guidance. So planning, starting to take action steps. You shouldn't implement the algorithms in your products and start selling them yet. You need to wait for the final standards, but you can be testing them out and doing these action items that you're hearing about and that's in this guidance here. Working on industry-specific standards or looking at protocols that need to be tweaked slightly to fit the algorithms. Those are all important things to do.
Agree. I will speak for some of the telcos in the room today that I am very excited to see that they're not taking an ambitious approach to PQC. They're taking a pragmatic, getting their NCCOE equivalent. I wouldn't dare say that, but getting a cyber center of excellence or a PQC center of excellence in-house is absolutely crucial. I've talked to probably 30 different organizations in the last, say, 2 months. And with no exception, there is receptivity to that, meaning this is different. This isn't just, like I said, an IT project that someone tapped somebody on the shoulder for and said, hey, can we transition over to a new, IPsec ... This is big. So what we're seeing is some of the largest banks in the world, Wells Fargo, for example, who carried, by the way, 22 post-quantum patents, stepped out and said, we have 3 projects in 2024, of which one of them is PQC. That has got the attention of the most highest of the organizations, meaning they also have to interoperate with all of the telcos and the other banks. So they're setting up cyber centers of excellence, making sure that they test, and test everything. Don't take the word of one organization, but they're all building out centers of excellence and investing in that because it is an undertaking of, and I don't want to say monstrous proportions, but it's an undertaking that they're all taking very seriously. So I think that's one of the most important things we're seeing in 2023, 2024. I think you're going to hear more and more about people setting up these cyber centers of excellence. So that's my take.
We believe in those centers of excellence. The way the day is going to work, we're going to hold off on questions from the audience until the end of all of the briefings, but all of the panelists will be here at the end to answer any questions that you may have. So please make sure you're here for, you keep those questions and we'll answer them at the end. I want to thank the panelists, particularly since I took them a little bit down a road, but I knew they'd be fine because these really are 4 experts in the field. So we're really lucky to have them today. And we're lucky our great group of 3 up here, Lori, Yolanda, and Luke, pulled these experts here. So let's give all 7 of them a big round of applause.